Arizona Cardinals double down next April? Or should they do something differently altogether? Should it be something completely off the board, off the beaten path? That, to me, is the question that we will be debating between now and the time that they make their pick with the 16th overall selection in the 2025 NFL Draft. This, to me, is the biggest question mark surrounding this team. Double down or something new entirely. What do I mean by that? Well, this team spent big in free agency. Got Josh Sweat. Got Dalvin Tomlinson. Addressed their need at edge. Addressed their need on the interior of the defensive lineman. But we all think that they could do more at both of those spots. We all think that Josh Sweat, while a fantastic addition to this defense, cannot be the only addition that this team makes to that group. They had a quality and quantity problem last year when it came to their edge group. They didn't have a lot of high-end difference makers, and they also just didn't have a lot of guys that we trusted to provide any level of pass rush production. So you make the move, you pay $70+ million for Josh Sweat, you get him here, want it to be with Jonathan Gannon, want it to be with Nick Rallis, want it to be a part of what was being built here in Arizona with the Cardinals. That's great. A fantastic move for the Cardinals this offseason. But it cannot happen in isolation. There needs to be more with it. And so do the Cardinals double down on draft night and take another edge or another interior defensive lineman? Or do they look at the fact that they've got that edge player, that they got that interior defensive lineman, and they pivot, and there's a switch? We're going to maybe look to get our wide receiver here. Maybe we'll look to get another corner. Maybe we'll take an offensive lineman. I only looked at 2 today, but there were 2 mock drafts that I perused this morning. The first one was on the 33rd team, and that had the Cardinals going with Banks, the offensive tackle. I then saw a PFF mock draft that had the Cardinals going with edge. 2 mock drafts, both released today, both going in different directions, both funneling us to this question. Do you double down and take another edge? Or now, because you filled all these other needs, do you go out and think for the future? It's a good problem to have. It's a nice position to be in. It's nice to have the flexibility to go one way or another, but what is the right decision for this team at this point in their life cycle? What is the best decision for the Arizona Cardinals? Double down? Do something differently altogether? I don't know the answer to that question as we sit here today. I don't know which camp I'd lean to. Part of me thinks you're picking 16th overall. This question's going to kind of get answered for you on draft night with how the board plays out. Because you may walk into draft night going, we are doubling down, we are taking an edge, and then all the guys that you have up on the top of your board aren't there. You're not going to just double down for the sake of doubling down. If you don't love or like one of the guys that's available to you there at 16, you're just not going to do it. So the choice may be taken out of your hands. But right now, in the lead up to April, in the lead up to the draft, we can have this conversation. We can debate what the right course of action is for this team. Now, there's going to be another wave of free agency. There's going to be more depth additions. They added a wide receiver over the weekend. They're going to continue to make these moves on the margins that could paint us a picture of what they might be doing on draft night. They spent their big dollars. They made their major acquisitions. Now I think it's going to be stuff in the background. It's going to be stuff on the margins to make this team better. So double down or do something differently entirely. Just do something entirely different from the things that have been mocked. Edge, defensive tackle. That's what the 33rd team mock did this morning by giving them the offensive tackle banks. Not somebody who would probably start for the team right away, but thinking about the future. Using the opportunity that is presented to be able to make a pick for the future. It's always nice when you can make a pick and there isn't an expectation for that player to be a home run and be super impactful right off the bat, right? It's nice when you have a roster that's pretty good across the board to where you don't need somebody to be an impactful starter with that 16th overall pick. You can kind of play the projection game a little bit. So you can choose that. So there's the double down or do something entirely different. There's that conversation. But then there's the sub-conversation of, do you want to get somebody who can be a meaningful, impactful starter right now? Or are you okay with playing the projection game, playing the long game, drafting somebody at a position that maybe isn't a starter in 25, but is a starter in 26? That's part of this too. That's part of the calculation. All of this available, all of this up for debate because of what the Cardinals did in free agency. Because they attacked free agency the way that they did. Because they landed a big fish in Josh Sweat. Because they landed Dalvin Tomlinson as part of the interior of the defensive line. Because they got those guys. Because they made those additions. Opens up all of this. And so this is going to be the lens that I think we should view everything in for the next month. And you're seeing it. You're seeing mock drafts react to what the Cardinals did in free agency and say, okay, they're going to pivot and go in a different direction. And then you see other mock drafts that are taking this information and say, they still need help here. We're going to double down. Both have their redeeming qualities. Both have their sets of pros and cons. Both avenues make sense for this team if they choose to go down that path. To me, I'd like to see more on the defensive side. I'd like to see this edge group be a little bit more well-rounded. So I would be team double down right now. I would be team get me somebody who can be an impactful starter, and I kind of get the best of both worlds. Because I have Josh Sweat, if I double down and I take an edge rusher, they don't have to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. They don't have to be super impactful from the word go. They can just learn under the tutelage of Josh Sweat. They can be in a low-pressure environment of not being the number one guy that everybody's focusing on when you play the Cardinals. But because of Sweat's appearance out on the field, because Sweat is a part of this team, it might open up opportunities for that rookie. That, to me, feels like the best of both worlds. That feels like the ideal scenario playing itself out on draft night. An edge guy that you want lands there at 16. You can double down. You can add to a room that needs more help, but you can bring in somebody who is not going to be under pressure to have a double-digit sack season and be the lead edge guy for the Arizona Cardinals. You've got that. That's what Josh Sweat was brought here to do. So I kind of like that as we sit here on March 17th. I may see a mock draft where a player falls that I wasn't anticipating at wide receiver or at offensive tackle, and I go, oh, man, could you really pass that guy up? T-Mac falls to 16. Could you really pass up taking the wide receiver out of the University of Arizona? I don't know if you could do that. So I may oscillate. I may sway back and forth. But right now, I'm leaning towards team double down. I'm leaning towards keep swinging the bat. Keep adding to this room. You were not just one player away, so don't act like it. Don't act like you were just one player away. Double down, something entirely different altogether. I don't know. There are good cases for both of those scenarios playing themselves out on draft night, and that is the question. That, to me, is the one question about the 16th overall pick. That's it. It's not this player or that player. It's not how do we feel about this player. It's philosophically, what are they trying to accomplish? What do they think is best for the short and long term of this team?